There is a small town in Sardinia, Italy, where researchers from some of the world's most prestigious universities have been showing up for decades with clipboards, blood pressure cuffs, and a level of scientific curiosity that borders on obsession. And they keep coming back because of the people who live there, people who are 100 years old and still tending their gardens, people who are 102 and still cooking their own meals, people who are 105 and living entirely alone, not in a care facility, not with full-time help, but genuinely, independently, on their own terms, waking up every morning with a purpose, a routine, and a body that has somehow refused to surrender to the timeline that modern medicine assumes is inevitable. Scientists call places like this blue zones. And the question that has driven decades of research into these communities is deceptively simple. What are these people doing that everyone else is not? What is different about the way they live, the way they move, the way they think, and most specifically for what we are talking about today, the way they eat in the morning? Because it turns out that what a person over 80, 90, or 100 puts into their body in the first hours of the day has an outsized and disproportionate effect on their strength, their independence, their cognitive clarity, and their biological resilience throughout every hour that follows. And when you look at the morning food patterns of the world's longest-lived, most independently functioning older adults, you find not chaos and variety, but a set of surprisingly consistent choices that modern nutritional science can now explain at the molecular level. That is exactly what we are going to break down today. Stay right here. Welcome. If this is your first time on this channel, I am genuinely glad you found your way here. This is Dr. Alex Morgan, Aging Wellness Lab, and what we do here is take the science of aging seriously, not the watered-down, oversimplified version that gets reduced to eat your vegetables and take a walk, but the deep, specific mechanistic science that explains why certain choices produce dramatically different biological outcomes as we get older. If that is the kind of content you want more of, please hit subscribe right now and give this video a like before we go any further. It helps this information reach people who need it, and today's topic is one that I have been wanting to cover for a long time because the research on morning nutrition and longevity is richer and more specific than most people realize. All right, let us build the full picture together. Before we get into the specific foods, I want to establish something that is going to make everything else make more sense. And that is the concept of what researchers call the morning anabolic window. Here is what that means and why it matters more after 60 than at any other point in life. While you sleep, your body is in a fasted state. Your last meal from the evening before has been digested, absorbed, and largely utilized. By morning, circulating amino acid levels are low. Blood glucose has been regulated overnight by your liver's glycogen stores, which are now partially depleted. Cortisol, your primary waking hormone, is at its daily peak, having risen gradually in the early morning hours to prepare your body for the demands of the day. This cortisol spike is natural and necessary, but in the absence of nutritional input, it produces a catabolic effect, meaning your body begins breaking down its own tissue, including muscle tissue, to generate the glucose and amino acids it needs to function. In a young adult, this morning catabolic state is relatively brief and mild. The body recovers quickly once food is consumed. In an older adult, particularly one over 60, 70, or 80, the catabolic response to the overnight fast is more pronounced and more damaging. The reason is a phenomenon called anabolic resistance, which we have discussed on this channel before, but which is worth revisiting in this context. Anabolic resistance means that older muscles are less sensitive to the signals that trigger muscle protein synthesis, the process by which your body builds and repairs muscle tissue. It takes more protein, more specifically leucine-rich protein, consumed at the right time, to produce the same muscle-building response in a 65-year-old that a much smaller amount of protein would produce in a 30-year-old. In the morning, when the body is coming out of its overnight catabolic state and cortisol is driving tissue breakdown, is precisely the window when getting the right nutritional input matters most. This is not theoretical. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition compared muscle protein synthesis rates in older adults who consumed a protein-rich breakfast with those who consumed a carbohydrate-dominant or low-protein breakfast. The group that consumed adequate protein at breakfast showed significantly greater muscle protein synthesis throughout the day, not just in the morning, but across the entire subsequent 24-hour period. What you eat in the morning sets the anabolic tone for the whole day. Miss that window or fill it with the wrong foods and your muscles are playing catch-up for the next 23 hours. Get it right, and you are building and protecting lean tissue from the very first hour of the day. Now let us talk about the specific foods that the research on both longevity populations and nutritional science converge on as the most powerful morning choices for older adults who want to maintain strength, independence, and biological resilience well into their later decades. The first food is eggs, and I want to go beyond the standard protein talking point because there is something specific about eggs in the morning for older adults that most nutritional discussions miss entirely. A whole egg, not just the white, the whole egg including the yolk, provides somewhere between 6 and 7 grams of complete protein with an amino acid profile that is among the most bioavailable of any food on Earth. The biological value of egg protein, a measure of how efficiently your body can use the protein for tissue building, is the standard against which all other proteins are measured. It sits at 100, the highest score possible. But beyond protein, the yolk delivers something that is critically relevant to morning function in older adults: choline. Choline is a nutrient that most people have never heard of, despite the fact that it is essential for the production of acetylcholine, the primary neurotransmitter involved in memory, attention, and muscle control. Acetylcholine is the chemical signal that your nervous system sends to your muscles to make them contract. When acetylcholine signaling is robust, movements are precise, coordinated, and strong. When it is depleted, which happens with age, with poor diet, and with certain medications, muscle weakness, cognitive fog, and coordination problems worsen. A study from the University of Eastern Finland followed over 2,000 middle-aged men for over 20 years and found that those with the highest dietary choline intake showed significantly better cognitive function in later life and significantly reduced risk of dementia, and choline deficiency is extraordinarily common in the American population. Surveys suggest that over 90% of Americans consume less than the adequate intake for choline. 2 eggs at breakfast provides roughly half of the daily adequate intake for an adult. Starting the day with eggs is not just a protein strategy, it is a neuromuscular and cognitive protection strategy. The second morning food is one that has been eaten for breakfast by centenarians in multiple Blue Zone regions, from Sardinia to Okinawa to the Greek island of Ikaria, in various forms, and that modern nutritional science has since identified as one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory, gut-protective, and longevity-associated foods available. That food is fermented dairy, specifically plain yogurt or kefir. The specific form matters. Sweetened commercial yogurt with fruit flavoring and added sugar is not what we are talking about. Plain, full-fat, minimally processed yogurt, preferably from grass-fed milk, or kefir, which contains a broader spectrum of probiotic strains than standard yogurt, is what the research and the longevity populations point to. The mechanism here runs through the gut microbiome, which, as research from the past decade has established with increasing clarity, plays a far more central role in aging than anyone understood even 15 years ago. The gut microbiome of centenarians, people who have lived to 100 or beyond, has been studied in multiple populations, and a consistent finding emerges. Long-lived individuals tend to have greater microbial diversity, higher populations of specific beneficial bacterial strains, and lower levels of inflammatory bacterial species compared to age-matched individuals who did not reach extreme old age. The gut microbiome influences aging through multiple mechanisms. It regulates systemic inflammation through the production of short-chain fatty acids and the maintenance of the intestinal barrier. It modulates the immune system, which becomes increasingly dysregulated with age in a process called inflammaging, the chronic low-grade inflammation that underlies virtually every major age-related disease. It produces neurotransmitters and neuroactive compounds that influence brain function and mood, and it appears to play a role in regulating the pace of biological aging at the cellular level through effects on telomere maintenance. Consuming fermented dairy in the morning, a cup of plain Greek yogurt or a glass of kefir, delivers live probiotic cultures that support microbiome diversity, along with prebiotic compounds that feed beneficial bacteria, along with casein protein that provides a slow, sustained release of amino acids throughout the morning hours to maintain the anti-catabolic effect we discussed earlier. It is a remarkably complete morning food that addresses gut health, protein needs, calcium for bone density, and immune function simultaneously. The third morning food is one that most people in longevity research circles know well, but that has not fully penetrated mainstream health awareness, and that is a small portion of mixed nuts, particularly walnuts, almonds, and Brazil nuts consumed together. The research on nut consumption and longevity outcomes is among the most consistent in all of nutritional epidemiology. The Nurses' Health Study, the Physicians' Health Study, and the Pre-Dimed Trial, 3 of the largest and most rigorous dietary studies ever conducted, all found significant reductions in cardiovascular mortality, all-cause mortality, and cognitive decline in people who consume nuts regularly compared to those who did not. The effect sizes are not trivial. In the Pre-Dimed Trial, participants assigned to a Mediterranean diet supplemented with nuts showed a 30% reduction in major cardiovascular events compared to controls. But the specific morning relevance of nuts for older adults goes beyond their general health benefits. Walnuts are one of the richest plant-based sources of alpha-linolenic acid, an omega-3 fatty acid that the body can partially convert to EPA and DHA, the forms of omega-3 that directly combat the anabolic resistance of aging muscles and reduce neuroinflammation. Almonds provide magnesium, a mineral that is deficient in a significant proportion of older Americans, and that plays essential roles in muscle contraction, nerve function, blood pressure regulation, and blood sugar control. And Brazil nuts provide selenium. Just 2 Brazil nuts per day provides the entire daily adequate intake of selenium, a mineral that is a cofactor for glutathione peroxidase, one of the body's most important antioxidant enzymes, and that plays a critical role in thyroid hormone activation. Thyroid function declines with age in many people, and subclinical hypothyroidism, thyroid function that is low but not low enough to trigger a clinical diagnosis, is one of the most common and most underdiagnosed contributors to the fatigue, weight gain, cognitive slowdown, and cold sensitivity that older adults frequently attribute to aging. A small handful of mixed nuts, roughly 1 ounce, about what fits in the palm of your hand, consumed with breakfast, provides this entire spectrum of benefits without adding excessive calories. The fat content of nuts improves the absorption of fat-soluble nutrients from everything else you eat at breakfast. And the fiber content contributes to the sustained energy and appetite regulation that keeps you functioning well through the morning, without the blood sugar crash that comes from carbohydrate-dominant breakfasts. The 4th morning food is one that has an extraordinary and specific relevance to muscle maintenance in older adults that most people have never heard, and that is oatmeal, prepared in a specific way that transforms it from a standard breakfast carbohydrate into a genuinely functional food for aging bodies. The specific preparation I am referring to involves cooking steel-cut oats, not instant oats, not quick oats, but steel-cut oats, which retain the most intact grain structure and therefore the slowest digestion rate, and then cooling them overnight in the refrigerator before eating them the next morning. This cooling process, which can be followed by gentle reheating, produces something called resistant starch through a process called retrogradation. Resistant starch is a form of carbohydrate that behaves more like dietary fiber than like a regular starch. It resists digestion in the small intestine and travels to the large intestine, where it becomes a prebiotic fuel source for beneficial gut bacteria, particularly strains that produce butyrate. Butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid that has anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body, supports the integrity of the gut lining, and has been shown in research to have protective effects on colon health and metabolic function. Overnight cooled oatmeal eaten in the morning provides this resistant starch benefit alongside beta-glucan, the soluble fiber in oats that has the most robust evidence base of any dietary fiber for LDL cholesterol reduction and cardiovascular protection. The FDA allows an authorized health claim on oat beta-glucan specifically because the evidence for its cardiovascular benefit is so strong and so consistent. For an older adult whose cardiovascular risk is elevated simply by virtue of age, starting the day with beta-glucan-rich oatmeal is a simple, inexpensive, and genuinely evidence-backed cardiovascular protective practice. Add a tablespoon of ground flaxseed to the oatmeal, which provides additional lignans with hormonal modulating effects and additional omega-3 fatty acids, and you have transformed a standard breakfast grain into a multi-system longevity food. The 5th morning food is one that connects directly to the lifestyles of the world's longest-lived populations in a way that is both culturally fascinating and biologically well explained. And that is olive oil, consumed in the morning as part of breakfast rather than reserved exclusively for cooking later in the day. In regions like Crete, Sardinia, and southern Spain, populations with among the highest rates of healthy longevity in the world, olive oil at breakfast is traditional and common. A drizzle of high-quality extra virgin olive oil over eggs, over bread, over vegetables, or even consumed by itself, as some centenarians report doing, delivers a remarkable concentration of bioactive compounds that no other common food matches. The primary bioactive in extra virgin olive oil is oleocanthal, a phenolic compound that inhibits the same enzymes that ibuprofen inhibits, producing a natural anti-inflammatory effect that is detectable in the body within hours of consumption. Oleocanthal is only present in extra virgin olive oil. Refined olive oil, light olive oil, and olive oil pomace contain negligible amounts because the processing that creates those products destroys the phenolic content. It is also worth noting that oleocanthal concentration varies significantly between brands and origins, with early harvest, cold-pressed oils from high polyphenol olive varieties containing the most. The slight throat-tingling sensation that high-quality extra virgin olive oil produces is actually a direct sensory indicator of oleocanthal content. The stronger the tingle, the more oleocanthal is present. But oleocanthal is not the only relevant compound in extra virgin olive oil. Oleic acid, the primary fatty acid, has been shown to reduce inflammatory gene expression in human studies. Hydroxytyrosol, another phenolic, has demonstrated protective effects on cardiovascular endothelial function and has been studied for its role in reducing LDL oxidation, which is the specific form of LDL that most directly damages arterial walls. And squalene, a triterpene compound in olive oil, has shown protective effects on cellular DNA that may contribute to the reduced cancer rates observed in high olive oil consuming populations. 2 tablespoons of high-quality extra virgin olive oil consumed daily, some of it at breakfast over eggs or bread, some of it used for cooking or dressing later in the day, is a morning habit with a genuinely remarkable evidence base behind it. The 6th morning food is something that appears on the tables of centenarians in almost every blue zone studied, and that modern research is now explaining at a mechanistic level with growing excitement, and that is fresh or lightly cooked dark leafy greens. Spinach, kale, Swiss chard, dandelion greens, or any dark green leafy vegetable consumed as part of breakfast. In an omelet, alongside eggs, blended into a morning smoothie, or sautéed in olive oil as a side, provides a package of nutrients that addresses multiple aging mechanisms simultaneously. The dietary nitrates in leafy greens, which are converted to nitric oxide in the body, improve vascular function by causing blood vessels to relax and dilate, improving blood flow to the muscles, the brain, and the heart. This nitric oxide pathway is particularly important for older adults because nitric oxide production declines significantly with age as the endothelial cells that produce it become less functional. Dietary nitrates provide a substrate bypass. They replenish the nitric oxide supply through a pathway that does not depend on endothelial function. Research has shown that dietary nitrate supplementation improves exercise efficiency in older adults, meaning their muscles can produce the same amount of physical work using less oxygen, a meaningful benefit for people whose cardiovascular reserve is reduced. Leafy greens also provide folate, essential for DNA methylation and cellular repair, magnesium, for the muscle and nerve functions we discussed earlier, and vitamin K, which plays critical roles in bone metabolism and cardiovascular calcification prevention that are particularly relevant in older adults. At Dr. Alex Morgan, Brimbury Aging Wellness Lab, the recurring theme across all the research we review on longevity nutrition is not that any single food is a magic solution. It is that certain foods, consumed consistently and in combination, create a nutritional environment in the body that supports the biological processes that sustain health and function at advanced ages. The centenarians and near centenarians who live independently cook their own meals, tend their gardens, and engage with life with genuine vitality at ages that most people consider incompatible with independence are not doing anything exotic or inaccessible. They are eating real food. They are eating it consistently. They are eating it in the morning as a deliberate and important part of their day. And they are eating it in combinations that modern science can now explain are synergistically protective. The 7th morning food closes this list with something that is both the simplest and, in terms of the research on longevity populations, one of the most consistently observed habits, and that is water, consumed deliberately and in meaningful quantity before and during the morning meal. Dehydration in older adults is extraordinarily common and extraordinarily under-recognized. The thirst mechanism becomes less sensitive with age. Older adults genuinely feel less thirsty than younger people even when they are measurably dehydrated. And the consequences of chronic mild dehydration are not trivial. Reduced cognitive function, increased fatigue, impaired kidney function, reduced joint lubrication, constipation, increased risk of urinary tract infections, and impaired thermoregulation. Many of the cognitive symptoms that are attributed to aging, the mental slowness, the reduced concentration, the word-finding difficulties, are in a meaningful subset of cases simply the consequence of chronic mild dehydration in a person whose thirst sense has stopped reliably signaling their need for fluids. Establishing a morning water practice, 16 to 24 ounces of water consumed before or with breakfast, before any coffee or tea, rehydrates the body from the overnight fasting period and sets up the physiological environment in which all the other morning foods work more effectively. Digestion improves, nutrient absorption improves, kidney filtration improves, cognitive clarity improves within 20 to 30 minutes of adequate rehydration. It is the simplest, cheapest, and most universally applicable morning longevity habit, and it is one that a remarkable number of older adults are not doing. I want to bring all of this together with a practical morning framework that you can implement starting tomorrow. Before you get out of bed, drink a glass of water from the one you placed on your nightstand the night before. While you prepare breakfast, drink another. Breakfast itself, whether you eat it immediately upon waking or within the first hour or two, which research suggests is the optimal window for preventing morning catabolism, should include eggs cooked in extra virgin olive oil, a side of sautéed or raw spinach or kale, a small bowl of overnight cooled steel-cut oatmeal with ground flaxseed stirred in, a cup of plain Greek yogurt or a glass of kefir, and a small handful of mixed nuts on the side. This breakfast is not difficult to prepare. It does not require exotic ingredients. It requires perhaps 15 minutes of preparation time, and it delivers a nutritional package that addresses protein needs for muscle maintenance, omega-3 fatty acids for anabolic resistance and neuroinflammation, probiotics for gut microbiome health, beta-glucan for cardiovascular protection, dietary nitrates for vascular function, choline for neuromuscular signaling, selenium for thyroid and antioxidant function, and oleocanthal for systemic anti-inflammatory protection, all before 9 in the morning. This is what the research on longevity populations, combined with the mechanistic science of aging nutrition, points to as the morning pattern of people who maintain strength and independence into their 10th and 11th decades of life. Not supplements, not powders, not expensive protocols, real food chosen thoughtfully, prepared simply, and consumed consistently, morning after morning for years and decades. Before I let you go today, I want to ask you something that I mean genuinely. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of these morning foods are you already eating, and which one are you going to add starting tomorrow? I am specifically interested in hearing from people who are over 60, 70, or 80, and have already noticed connections between what they eat in the morning and how they feel for the rest of the day. Your experience and your observations are valuable to this community, and your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to read to take their first step toward a different kind of morning routine. And please share this video, with a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, a friend who has been told that declining strength and independence are just what aging looks like, because this video is evidence that there is another story, and that story is written one morning meal at a time. Subscribe if you have not already, take these morning food choices seriously, and I will see you in the next video at Dr. Alex Morgan, Josh Aging Wellness Lab, where we will keep going deeper into everything the science of aging has to teach us about living longer, stronger, and more independently than most people believe is possible.